Hi, my name is Ayati Dashkar. I'm the founder of the Queendom Metaverse. So if you don't know what the Queendom Metaverse is, it is combining technology and creativity, creating virtual worlds for girls to express themselves using the metaverse. And I'm also hosting a podcast called Girls Talk STEM. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And as we're heading into the next session, I just want to say 2023 was my first Davos, 3 years ago. And when before coming, I searched up who are the CEOs attending WEF. And the only CEO that I could recognize was Miss Sheryl Sandberg. And this shows the misrepresentation and the education that we don't have about CEOs in our media. But when you do a Google search of images, of gossip images, you find 62% women gossiping, 7% men gossiping, and 32% both genders gossiping. This shows the misrepresentation of women, as we call them, gossip queens, chatterboxes. They yap a lot, as we say. But this shows the misrepresentation, and we really need to fix that. And this is how I want to introduce the next panel of how our CEOs and executives are represented in our media. With that, I want to introduce Mr. Marc Walder, who's the CEO of Ringier AG, and the esteemed panelists.
Thank you so much. I'll introduce my panelists, my wonderful panelists, in a second. Let me just make a remark. So 30 minutes ago, I've been at the Congress Center. It's less crowded there. So maybe, and as a proposition, Rupa, I know probably every panel starts like this. This is phenomenal. This is phenomenal. Probably 2028. They're going to do their forum here. You're going to do your forum at the Congress Center. Now, let me introduce, and we have 30 minutes, so we have to be really precise. So let me introduce Katie Jackson first. Katie is the chief executive at Rio Tinto for the copper division, and Katie is also chairing the Powerful Women Initiative. Powerful Women Initiative is a UK's cross-industry initiative that is working for a gender-balanced, diverse and inclusive energy sector. Welcome, Katie. Our next panelist is Professor Menna El Asadi. Menna, welcome. Menna is, and I have to be precise because this is going to be very important on this panel, Menna is a professor of computer science specializing in the intersection of data analysis, visualization, computational linguistics, and explainable artificial intelligence. That makes you basically a standard panelist on any panel at this World Economic Forum. Then I would like to introduce Hetty Pai. Hetty is managing director at Russell Reynolds, but also, and this is very important, co-founded the RRA, Artemis initiative. That's a movement driving systemic change in succession planning, including pioneering Women CEO an accelerator. Welcome, Hetty. And then, of course, Annabella Bassler, my longtime CFO since 2012 actually, the CFO, and has been very important for transformation. The group, Ringier Media Group, that I have the honor to steer for 14 years now. But more importantly, Annabella, and we will talk about this, launched the EqualVoice initiative. Some of you might be familiar with this, and Annabella will talk about this. I will sit down in a second. I just have to get my cards right. But let me start with the following quote, and I know it has probably been touched here and discussed, but I think it's so important. And maybe it's also at a moment of, changing times, at least for some of the leaders, or some of the leaders do so. So let me quote Mark Zuckerberg again, and then maybe you can just share your thoughts. So let's take this super serious. So Mark, as you all know, I'm just going to repeat the whole quote. In his talk with Joe Rogan a couple of days ago said, a lot of the corporate world has become pretty, and I quote, pretty culturally neutered. Therefore, and I quote, we need more masculine energy. Now your thoughts, who wants to start? Please.
Well, I guess I picked up the microphone. So I guess taking a step back, if I think about my experience, so I come from a background in the energy industry. I've recently moved into the mining space, and so natural resources as a whole remains an area where fundamentally the vast majority of jobs are held by men. So I think the company I work for now is around a quarter female, and that's sort of not unusual. I think if I look across the UK energy space, board representation's around 30%. So those are the sort of the numbers. So I do agree that I think many companies, including my own, are on a cultural journey to find and to develop the right culture, a culture that those companies can be proud of. I'm not sure if it's about more masculine energy. I think, though it is important to recognize, and I'm sure you've touched on this today as well, that there is a bit of a backlash at the moment. And so I think we do need to have an open conversation about the kind of cultures we want in the workplace. My experience is that actually men and women, if you go and talk to them, they tend to want the same thing, which is a workplace where they can show up every day and kind of be psychologically safe and be the sort of people that they are. And actually, as an employer, I also want people who feel that they can turn up and say what they think is the right thing to do in the work environment, because that's, I think, a huge part of getting the best out of your workforce.
Thank you, Katie.
And being efficient.
I think we all agree.
Stop.
Hetty.
So, Marc, I might add, and absolutely picking up on what you said, Katie, recognising that we're perhaps finding ourselves in a slightly different environment to the one that we might have looked back on only in the past, say, 2-3 years. Actually, for us, as we think about that shift in emphasis potentially, actually we think it's an entirely different point. If we look outside, I think everyone's going to agree that leading in this world is ever more complicated. And everyone is going to agree that we don't have the level of choice of quality leader to help us embrace, tackle, and succeed in overcoming some of those challenges and unlocking some of those opportunities. So if we then go back, and the Russell Reynolds focus, albeit it's interested in all things equality, in this context is really focused on the boardroom, and especially women CEOs, then we go back to the statistic that we're stuck. So 10% of CEOs of large-scale organizations and enterprises, give or take, are women, and that statistic is stuck. So if we're then going back to the point around choice and expansion of that choice, there's a massive untapped opportunity, and it's not a head-on collision between one person being right or one person being wrong.
Thank you, Hetty. Annabella next. Just a short opening statement. And I think, by the way, it is a perfect, it's helping the whole thing, by the way. That's what I think, because we're discussing it now.
I'm totally with you, Marc. Mark Zuckerberg's call for more masculine energy totally ignores the power of diverse voices. And we all know that true innovation thrives upon diversity, thrives upon inclusivity, and not aggression. And we with media and tech, we have seen the progress that you can see if you care about an equal representation. So now the time for action, it's about inclusion, not exclusion.
Thank you, Annabella. Mena?
Right, so I think from my side, I put on my professor's hat, and I will try to show the statistics maybe. So I brought with me a couple of slides to actually show you a little bit.
Let's show them, let's show them.
What do we actually
And don't be shocked.
So if we can go to the slide, please. Here we go. So this is basically a project that we did looking at the census data from the US, looking at job distribution. Unfortunately, the videos I just realized are not playing, so you would have seen the actual project, but you can go to the QR code and experience it yourself. But our world is shockingly biased. And we produce a lot of data based on our world, on day-to-day interaction. And this data is being picked up and learned by a lot of models. So when we try to figure out, can we compare this to what a model would predict if we asked it, for example, a politician is going this direction or whatever, and then the model needs to fill in he or she should do X, or like would try to predict which name it would give to someone. The model actually just reflects what we have in the world in terms of bias. And if we could go to the next slide and actually look a little bit closer, you'll see that the model, if we try to ask like what would be stereotypical presentation that would distinguish female and male pronouns, it would tell us that models are blonde, hysterical receptionists and housekeepers, and men are strong football players and presidents. That's what the model has learned. And the question to all of you is, what should we have the model learn? It is an engineering task that we can actually address. And I think the answer is, we can make models that represent gender and a 50-50 parity between male and female, or we could have models that represent our real world. And I think that for different tasks, we might want different models. So that's my introduction.
So we are in the middle of the discussion. As you understand, this is about the role of media, and this is about the role of technology. This was already a very good opening in terms of the role of technology. Annabella, the role of media. Ringier has in its portfolio 120 or so media brands, and Annabella launched an initiative which is called EqualVoice. She will be too modest to say herself. It reaches 50 million citizens per month already. What does EqualVoice do, Annabella?
Well, it's exactly what you were mentioning. It's about to refine the input in AI now, and this is what we do with EqualVoice. And we use two tools for this. We started 5 years ago with the EqualVoice factor. And me as a CFO, you can imagine that I just love numbers, facts, and figures. So what we did is we did a combination of media and tech and data. Real time, we are measuring how often men or women are being represented in media. And when we started, the global coverage of media for men was 82%, for women 18%. So we are measuring it, and I'm totally convinced by measuring it, you can empower people. So do the measurement. Secondly now, and this was just launched in autumn last year, is the EqualVoice Assistant. And watch out, we called it EqualVoice Assistant, not boss. It gives all our journalists who can use it the possibility that when writing the articles, real time you have a peer, a machinery peer, that helps you to analyze the text. It shows if there are any kind of gender imbalances in your text, yes or no. It shows you the stereotypes, and it makes a suggestion, a solution, how you could stop, how you could break the bias, and how you have a more diverse perspective in your article.
So we have heard Menna about tech and Annabella about the role of media. Again, it's shockingly it's true, 82% male, 18% female. This EqualVoice factor measures constantly and basically gives the newsrooms, a mirroring of what the reality at the moment still is. Hetty, Russell Reynolds, you are just about to publish a study in a couple of weeks, you said, and the study is about on female CEOs in the media, so exactly this point. You promised to give us a sneak preview.
I will. I'm under some strict orders, not too sneaky, but
yes.
I'll give you a bit of a preview.
Is this Chatham House rules, by the way, here or not? No, we spread the word, of course.
So we are indeed. We're looking at men and women CEOs in the media specifically, and looking at how they're represented. So it's very interesting. So just before I get in there, I might tell you just a quick story, because I think it's quite emblematic. It was a Fortune 500, very well-known company, Male CEO, very successful, actually had identified one of his executive team, a woman, to be very much worthy of his to be his successor. And she didn't agree, she didn't think she had the capability and wasn't ready. Through working hard on her, encouraging her to change her mind, she did. She's now 6 years into that role and has actually eclipsed the performance of her successor. I only mention that because there's something that we're seeing, and it'll come out in a second in terms of our findings, is this point around what we're calling the competence and the confidence gap. Now, in this case of my story, the CEO actually was extremely encouraging, but what we are finding is that you have that gap that quite often is existing if you are the female executive or the woman executive. Actually, the CEO in boardrooms, however unintentionally, are actually perpetuating that gap. My story was unusual in that context. And now we're finding the media are absolutely bearing that out. So interestingly, whilst the statistics are almost nigh on the inverse of what Annabella said in terms of male versus female representation, you can swing that around pretty much in the CEO scenario, but it is of a negative kind. So what is it? Is underlining that competence-confidence gap. It's things like, it won't surprise you, the word confidence, which when attached to men is in nigh on all cases a positive correlation. For women, it's either too much or too little. The same relates to ambition. So if you think of all of that and you think one of the reasons we know when I talk to women CEOs or potential wannabe ones, they're not sure they want it, is because they are aware that that media scrutiny is actually severe and it's worse in their case. And so you therefore get this unfortunate, it's not a virtuous, it's a vicious circle of all parts of the cycle helping to reinforce why we get stuck at this 10%.
So everybody who is in media in here, these are many influential people, please start to publish the study as soon as it's here and then discuss the study. I think studies are important, but then we need, to have the dialogue. Katie, you are a leader in the natural resources sector. I think that is probably quite a male sector, probably, you will tell us. And you have a passion for inclusivity. What are the unique challenges you are facing in that part of the professional world? Can you let us know, especially maybe also your experience that you have now with Rio Tinto, which is a global leader in mining? Tell us your experience.
Yeah, I guess firstly, so I've got a very strong conviction that the business case is huge for the natural resources sector. So where I came from, the energy transition requires, I think, lots of new things in terms of innovation and fresh perspectives, which requires us to get the best talent that we can, be they male, female, or whatever. And as I come into mining, I think the relationship that we have with the communities that we operate in is a hugely important point for progressing projects that the world needs. So being able to engage and being able to tell our story and look like the communities we serve is hugely important. So there's a real business case, but I think as an industry or as a sort of sector as a whole, we really struggle with three things. So attracting women in, and then keeping them on, and then moving them up. So attracting women in, I think there is a big point and a role for media to play. I think that many people say that if you can't see it, then you can't be it. And there is a distinct lack of visible female role models, and so attracting girls into STEM, into engineering, into these kind of jobs is continues to be difficult, and that's something we need to work on. Then we need to keep them, and that's about culture. And then I think have the leadership courage to develop talent and promote them, and that's where Hetty was touching on.
Exactly. This is one of your core beliefs, Annabella. If you can't see it, you can't be it. Let me quickly share this anecdote. Goes 30 seconds. Some of you know it. Gina Davis, famous actress, was a speaker at the EqualVoice Summit, I think 2 years ago in Zurich, and she played at that time. This I think probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago. She played in a TV series the role of the U.S. president. And she had an autograph session, and the little girl walks up to her, and she said, "Can I have an autograph, Miss Davis?" And then she said, "Can I have a question?" And Gina said, "Yes, please go ahead." And she said, "Can a man also become president?" So this is, what you actually see is what you are. Now, Annabella, share. This is exactly what the EqualVoice initiative is about, and I will talk about tech again and AI and the large language models. But look, what is the experience now, 5 years into this initiative, talking to the newsrooms, etc., etc.? Like, and please be open. It's, newsrooms tend to say, why should an equal voice kind of algorithm decide what we're going to write? Well, it's not going to decide, but it's just going to maybe mirror your work. So how would you summarize the experience those 5 years so far?
Well, I think there's still a journey that we all are getting aware of our unconscious bias. And this was my experience when starting the dialogue with journalists 5 years ago. There were some journalists saying, oh yeah, good idea, but others were telling me, Annabella, you are so wrong. We don't have this. I know it. And then I said, let's measure it. Me as a CFO, let's do a challenge and let's have the numbers speak the truth. And this is actually exactly what was helping us. A rather emotional discussion, and diversity inclusion, especially in Switzerland, is still an emotional discussion, and in many other countries as well, as we are just saying now in America. So we noticed by measuring it, it totally became rationalized, and this definitely makes a difference. So 5 years from now, we have a lot of great journalists that just would raise their hand, no matter in what hierarchy they are, in the newsrooms, and just would say, but this is not equal voice. And then they will find joint solutions to make it equal voice.
Thank you, Annabella. Let's listen to Menna with the following question. Menna, I mean, we see the biases in large language models. We see how they work. That was very impressive. Now, we could try to turn it around and actually let it play, for the goal that we are all here in. And large language models completely changed, the way content is being produced. So share your thoughts on how we could actually try to actively use it for our goals, diversity, gender equality.
That's a great question. So I work in an area called intelligence augmentation, which means trying to bring in humans and AIs in different contexts and trying to assess basically when do we rely completely on human intelligence and when do we rely on artificial intelligence and how do we combine them. And two very exciting areas there that equate to kind of gender equality and that kind of stuff. So are looking at conversation augmentation. So in media, while you're reading an article or while you're listening to a conversation, or even a prototype that we just finished working on, is like while we're having this panel, we could have an augmentation in real time in the background telling us about everything that we missed, things that we might want to kind of venture into, biases that we maybe produced during talking about it, maybe having like a speaker view and also moderator view, but also something for the audience. So there is enough potential in all of this data and the models that we can actually do this augmentation.
We should do this.
We should, yeah, that's a great thing to work on. We currently kind of released the first prototype working with a consultant company, augmenting their conversations with their clients. And it's working really, really well. So I think this could be something that we really think about, how to integrate that in a personalized manner, also for reading articles and so on and so forth. And the second part, and I'll be very brief about that, is guidance, so coaching people in a personalized manner. So imagine everyone in the room, all of your combined experiences, if you could share that in a personalized way with a young girl that is trying to make a decision, with a CEO that is trying to assess how to appear. If we can collect all that in like collective experience, but share it in such a way that it's accessible, I think there lies a huge revolution that we can.
Menna just mentioned two very concrete projects, I think, and we should pick up on this in whatever way. I'm just asking because I don't know how much. 6 more minutes. We have 6 more minutes. Hetty, big question. So you are assessing leaders, you are picking leaders, you are proposing leaders, you're also shaping boards, executive boards, board of directors, etc., etc. Now, what needs to become true? Let's say you pick the time frame, 24 months, 48, whatever. Maybe you even do steps. Looking forward, your experience, what needs to become true to get closer and closer to our goal?
Timescales are difficult. I think that certainly if you're thinking about it from an organizational point of view and seeking to solve for things, at a minimum you're looking 1 to 2 years. We actually should be thinking 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, but from today, if that makes sense. But if we think about the conditions that need to happen, actually is the way that we're thinking about it at Russell Reynolds, and the point of the Artemis program is not to feel stuck. And once we realized that we weren't stuck, it was really quite liberating. So it's actually reframing and rethinking the data and how we're utilizing the data, but what we're valuing. And that's really an essential part. So when you talk to women CEOs, which we do for a living, you will find that they way outscore their male counterparts in the context of their central motivation. And their central motivation tends to be impact. If you take that across their male counterparts, you'll get more things around power, money, and status. I'm not saying that's exclusive, but there is quite a distinct correlation. It's distinction, I should say. You then put on top what I was saying a minute ago about how complex that world is and how the hell do we lead in it. You then actually, there is also, our data will also tell you, a direct correlation between impact and what we call multi-systems thinking, which we think is an essential component part of your ability to lead in today's world. What does that mean? It means you can see the different stakeholders, you're thinking about societal impact, you're thinking about the whole thing in a holistic way. So that's a good example. There are many more, but if we started to get both women themselves to embrace that motivation because they feel it, but what they do with it, but critically how boards, CEOs, ExCos, and the broader ecosystem starts to revalue things that are currently undervalued. And if we start with impact, would be a good place to begin with. So then you start to get to my point earlier around you're unsticking the women executives to feel empowered, you're unsticking the environment which is repeating itself, however unconsciously, and you are getting back to that point, Marc, around what are the conditions. It's starting to then become a virtuous, not a vicious circle on finding that we have greater choice of leadership at the top of organizations.
To pick up on this, maybe just a question to Katie. Is Rio Tinto being a global company, are there cultural differences that you see, let's say, between Europe, US, Asia, Southern America? How would you describe that? Or is that a naive question?
Well, so actually reflecting on that, I mean, so Rio is doing quite a lot of work on the culture in the company. They conducted an extensive and externally facilitated report called Everyday Respect about the culture in the company. And actually, I'm a recent joiner to Rio. Coming in, I was surprised, and I actually found it very positive that I got questions about that report from all geographies, actually. So it may be that the conversation is slightly different depending on where you sit, but actually I think it matters to everybody. And I do think that at this time of backlash, that leaders sort of staying the course on building the cultures that they want in their organizations is something that becomes a differentiator and is really important for employees.
To finish this panel, I would like to give each of you one thought everybody in here should take with him or her when she or her leaves the Mountain Plaza. Who wants to start? One thought.
Equality, it's not a women's issue, it's a humanish issue. So the time is now to refine what we put in all the AI models.
Yeah, so I'd echo that. I think it's about having CEOs and leaders stay the course on gender diversity despite the backlash that's going on. Let's not go backwards.
So I think we can validate everyone's lived experiences by letting technology really empower people. So I think we have a great opportunity now to think about how we want to shape the world using technology.
The diversity is not the enemy of choice. Choice is what everyone's looking for, so let's not make it about diversity, let's make it about expansion of choice.
Very good statements. Where's Rupa? Where is Rupa? Rupa, I can't see you. My thought is we need a bigger Congress Center for next year. Thank you so much.